All right, hello everyone. Welcome to our online Masters in Organizational Leadership mini lecture. We are so excited that you are all here. If you have any questions, we will have a live Q&A feature at the very end, and we will also be doing a brief program overview of our online Masters in Organizational Leadership after Ed presents his mini lecture as well. So without further ado, I will go ahead and pass it to Edward Barrows. Thank you.
All right. Thank you so much, Chloe. And it's great to see everybody here. Thank you for making time today to come and talk a little bit about leadership. So, as Chloe mentioned, I'm a professor of the practice of leadership as well as the academic director for our new Master of Organizational Leadership here at Brown in the School of Professional Studies. So, it's a real treat to be with you and share a topic that's near and dear to my heart. And certainly, we think on the minds of a lot of different people these days, from academia as well as in industry and government nonprofit. There's no shortage of need for leaders, ethical leaders, and good leaders across the spectrum. So with that, Chloe, if we could just go to the next slide, that would be handy. I'm going to ask people if you have in your own definition or your own mind, what is leadership? I don't know. Are we enabling people to participate in the chat? Can we do that? If you can, great. If not, no worries. But what I would love to know is two things, is just what's your definition of leadership? And when you think of a great leader, who would that be? So I'll give you a minute to think about that. I hope you have your definition in mind. All right. So helping others to achieve great things. Oh, excellent. Thanks, Kim. Rachel has leading with empathy and compassion for those who put themselves in others people's shoes. Okay, great. Someone who's a servant leader, authentic, empowers people. Thanks, Jen. Any other thoughts? Influence. You see that a lot in leadership. Thanks, Suzanne. And definitely. And this idea of a unifying goal. Hey, Mercedes, the ability to inspire. That looks like a very comprehensive definition. I hope people are using their own definition and not looking it up, but that's okay. Somebody who guides and inspires others. That's Shannon's point. We would call that person a leader, right? And Matt, you've got a willingness to be courageous. So and these are great. Hey, Chuck, blending art and science. I know Chuck's a guy that does this day to day. Hey, Twana, how are you? Inspires people. You see that a lot. When it comes down to leadership, you often hear, and I think many of us want inspiration. It makes me wonder, like, why do we need inspiration? I think many of us do, and then the question is why. Again, inspires people. Yeah, someone is able to help others. There's this developmental part that Juan talks about, helping people reach their true potential. These are great. So someone who can motivate and achieve success. I always ask people, can you really motivate other people? Is that external or internal? Do you motivate? Some days it's hard to motivate ourselves. It makes me wonder, can we even motivate other people? It's a great question. Yeah, Melissa, to your point, you need to know your values. If you're going to be an authentic leader, as someone said a bit earlier, it's helpful to know what my sort of center am I leading from? What are the values that I have? And I do like what you have, Melissa. There's also a personal aspect of it. It's not exclusively professional. And the question I would ask for many of you is, are you just a leader at work? Are you a leader in your family? Are you a leader with your friends in your community? And I guess the point I'm trying to make is, you're kind of a leader everywhere you go. One of the concepts we'll talk about in the course, we won't talk about it here today, is this concept of a leader's shadow. And what I mean by that is everywhere you go, you cast a shadow. Like we think about that in sort of scientific sense. When you go outside and there's sun, if there's sun outside or light, we cast a shadow. The same is true of being a leader. Wherever you go, you cast a shadow as a leader. And then we ask ourselves, well, what do we want that shadow to look like? So these are great. So you see a lot of common features in this definition, these ideas. Also, don't forget, there's another part of the question. Who for you embodies great leadership? Because many times we learn leadership using a concept called exemplar management or exemplar identification, which is we learn how to do things from people we emulate. So if there's somebody that we really think highly of as a leader, oftentimes we'll emulate some of those people. I was just asking the CEO I coached 2 days ago. I said, now he's a new CEO. I said, when you think back over your career, who stands out to you as someone really worthy of emulation as a leader? Because I think it's useful in many cases to reflect on that. Obama, great example of a leader for Shannon. Jimmy Carter, Mercedes, same thing. We're going with the presidential route here, I see. So that's one way to look at it. So I say thank you for the definition. Again, I like this empowering people. We oftentimes talk about that. Ken Frazier, a very well-known Merck CEO. I worked for as an advisor to the executive programs for leaders at Merck for many years, one of my largest clients at Duke. And Ken was very influential, and not just within Merck, but within the broader business community as well. He's a great example. Other thoughts? Jamie Dimon, a lot of business. Martin Luther King, hard to argue with that, Vernon, right? So the question I have for each of you as you sort of think through who your exemplar is more important than the person per se, is what are the characteristics and attributes or traits, or and more importantly, skills and behaviors that you would emulate? What are those things that you think make that person, Nelson Mandela, Simon Sinek, great? These are great examples. I never offer an opinion because I think it's primarily not appropriate. Each of you gets the chance to think about the leaders that are important to you. Bob Iger, sure, at Disney. A lot of business leaders, although we have some who are not. So the thing here is really and I think this really is what we're going to get after in the course. And when I say the course, I mean the master's program overall, is really helping you lead from where you are and who you are. It's really, really important. We do have a view of the world around authentic leadership, and there's probably 12 or 13 or 14 different leadership theories we'll cover in our initial course on foundations of management and leadership in the course. But we want to sort of get a grounding in what the theories are. Someone said in the chat, servant leadership. That is one way to lead. That is one theory. But there are many theories, and our goal is to expose you to all these theories in a formal, structured way, and then let you craft out of it your point of view. But we will touch on some more of the contemporary theories. So I really appreciate your thinking through this. I'm going to give you, if we can go to the next page, sort of my point of view, and it's very simple. And I'm going to explain why we use this. Now, I want to be clear. There are many, many, many ways to think about leadership. If you put in a definition of leadership, and I think some of you may have done that, you will get a lot of different points of view. But I think I try to distill it down. Peter Northouse has a book called Leadership. He's written, I think it's in like the 10th or 12th edition. And I think, but this actually evolves a little bit to what I would say is the Center for Creative Leadership's academic tested definition. And I think this may change some of your viewpoints. So I don't want to minimize any of the contributions all of you had, because I think they're really important around some of the behaviors and aspects of leadership that we want. I heard inspirational. I heard empowerment. I heard talent development was in there, but it wasn't called that specifically. All respect, admiration, getting the team to work together, all those things are important. But I try to distill it down to what the essence is of what we're trying to do as leaders. Now, there may be many, and there are different ways to do that. But I always encourage leaders, so let's focus on what we're trying to do here. And leadership in today's day and age, and the way we think about it is, and this may be different than how a lot of us were acculturated as sort of leaders. It's a process whereby an individual influences a group of people to achieve a common goal. Now, what's important about that definition? Feel free to put it in the chat. It's a process whereby an individual, and it could be a small team of people, influences a group of other people to accomplish or achieve a common goal. What do you think sort of the operative words there? Anyone want to chime in there? What do you think is important about this definition? Because it's really kind of a foundational way to think about leadership. Any takers out there? It's not that well, as a leader, you do some work, you delegate work, right? There's influence. That's a big part of it. Collaboration. There's a group of people. Influence is, so achievement, absolutely. Common goal. So George kind of hit on it. So one-to-many relationship, all these great perspectives on what we do as leaders. So there's a couple of things as we go through the rest of the slides, I want to focus on. One of the things I always tell the people I'm privileged enough to work with as an educator and executive coach is this. As a leader, your job is to get results. That's really important. Sometimes we lose that when we focus on the means to the end, but the end state is you are hired into a certain role to get results that are important for that role, the end state or what you're being chartered to do. And that's the goal. Typically, it's focusing on the resultant effect to the end, which is the common goal. So that's a really important part of it. Another part of it that I think is maybe different, and someone said that, and I think several people have said that, Jose as well as other folks, is it's a process. So it's not necessarily just about you as a leader. It's about the process of getting to that common goal. And that can be done, and more often these days, it's through influence rather than authority, but it's not one or the other necessarily. So thank you for that. Great thoughts. Let's go to the next page. I've got quite a few here, but I want to move along quickly. We're going to cover in the class, when you think about history, just some of the evolution of leadership thinking. We've thought about leadership in a sort of structured way for well over 100 years. It goes back into the 1800s. And the initial way we thought about leadership, it's called the great man theory. Obviously, it's not just men. We have great women too. And the idea is we do the exemplar approach. That was the initial way to think about leadership, is let's find people who are great at leadership and let's emulate them. The challenge with that, and all of these leadership theories are impartial. They are not 100% just do this theory and you'll get this outcome. They're all wrong and have limitations, but a lot of them are quite useful, right? That's the classic. I think Carl Weick said that at Michigan, all theories are wrong, but some of them are quite useful. And that's why we have these. But we started off thinking about who are great leaders. But the problem is we place this heroism aspect into leadership, that in order to be a great leader, you must be a hero. And that's not true. Some people are more introverted than others, and you can be a great leader as an introvert too. And sometimes we talk about that in class. As we get into the 1900s, into the sort of industrial century, we see that there's a set of traits. We look at people and say, what are some of the characteristics or traits or attributes of leaders? Some of it's intelligence, some of it's being. There is an element of extroversion that can help. It's not a requirement, but there's a set of traits. Again, Northhouse covers this pretty well. There's a set of traits that we oftentimes look to leaders. And when we name presidents, that's oftentimes the case. We're looking at certain traits. They tend to be very good at communicating. And we tend to place a higher premium on that. There's a skills approach, and I tend to migrate toward this. I've written a book on it, and the idea is you can learn leadership if you get better at a set of leadership skills. Empathy. I was just having this conversation with a coachee this morning. Be more empathetic, understand organizational politics, and navigate it. But you said, and many of you said influence. There's certain ways to be influential, but to be influential is a skill. You can work on it. In fact, I've written courses on it. We'll have this in our course where you practice these skills at work. So you can actually train yourself and get better at being influential, just as an illustration, negotiation, things like that. But the premise is you can get better at being a leader, which is why we have a whole degree program on it. What behaviors, what are the kind of behaviors or disciplines does someone get into? Some people love the military examples. That's just one type of leadership forum. There's many nonprofits, government entities. There's no one right way or structure, but we oftentimes look at the behaviors of leaders. What do they do consistently? Some of you have probably heard of situational leadership. It's an actual theory, situational leadership one and two. Researchers at Cornell, as well as University of Massachusetts, have dug into this. It's an actual theory where we moderate and change the way we lead as leaders based on the needs of the followers, right? So their skill level. We had a discussion last night in my class, online, my office hours, where someone said, what do you do if you're trying to delegate and you're not sure people will do it to the way you want? So we talked about what does it mean to delegate to people who have different varying skill levels. Some of you already know this from your work. We did talk about servant leadership. We just saw it in the chat. Sort of very focused again on the leader, and the leader's job is to empower and enable the followers to get the outcomes that they want, but it doesn't necessarily mean that they will. So how do we balance being servant-minded with being results-oriented as well? That's a challenge. Transformational leadership has to do with how we transform organizations, but not just organizations. This is one of the newer theories. How do we transform the people going on the journey with the leader in those organizations? So we think about what are the needs of the followers and how do they adapt and sort of attach themselves to the communication and the thinking, and the vision of the visionary transformational leader. Adaptive leadership is actually created by doctors, and talking about in complex organizations, how do we enable the organization to change itself in some respects? Instead of telling people, here's where we're going and what we're going to do, how do we create an environment where they feel some discomfort? where they feel a little disconnected, but with some guardrails so that they can actually adapt to the work on themselves. There's a whole branch of management and organizational literature around population and organizational ecology, which is how do we help people cope with the changing environment that they live in? If organizations, similar to organisms, cannot change, they will not survive in the changed world. And then the more recent leadership theory is authentic leadership. We talk about our authentic leadership, and it's a theory that's been around for a while. Bill George, a former CEO of Medtronic, wrote a book called True North, but there's other more academic focuses than just Bill's. The idea is, how do we become true to ourselves, have a true north? That's the name of his book. How do we have a purpose? How do we lead from a standpoint of values? So all this is to say that leadership thinking is fairly recent when we think about, the entire longevity of human existence, unsurprisingly. But it's become more scientized as of the last several decades. But there's no one size fits all. But it's important that we, as students of leadership and practitioners, understand the different views and start to think about how do we adopt those on our own. So let's go to the next slide. I'll talk for a couple of more minutes. We have a lot to cover. I could go on for hours, but I think we have a lot of questions probably. So we're going to talk about things in the course around formal authority, informal authority, leading from positional power versus personal power or some other power base. And power is a very important part of leadership. It's a word that people don't like to use very much. But if you don't have any power in organizations or any authority, it's going to be hard to lead. What makes people want to listen to you? Certainly your own personal characteristics and attributes, but sometimes positional power in a lot of cases does matter. The social structure and the environment that you're operating in. The definition of leadership here is another one. It's an organizational and political activity that mobilizes others to tackle collective problems, get work done, come up with solutions. That's Heifetz and company that created the adaptive leadership view. So you start to see there's different definitions in and of themselves. There's management, which typically we think of around organizing, controlling resources, and then it's hard to be a leader if you don't have a following. So these are some of the things that we'll cover off in the course as well. Next slide, please. So it is a bit of a flawed construct if we're not careful that I'm the leader and you're not. I'm going to tell you what to do and you'll do it, right? A lot of us, and when we think about an organizational hierarchy, think about leadership that way. It's not completely irrelevant. Otherwise, we wouldn't have formal authority and positional power. But it's not the predominant way that we lead anymore in the knowledge-based world that we live in. It's really this sort of social contract that goes back to this collaboration and group working together as a process to manage ourselves and accomplish the work within the social constructs and the organizational confines that we exist in. So we want to just sort of check our hat at the door, so to speak, when we come to this concept of leadership and what it means in the modern day. Next slide, please. And what I'm going to argue is it's this combination of things. Leadership has some informal authority, which is based on influence, as we talked about, but there's also an aspect of formal authority. Coercion is a way to get people to do things. And I think a very interesting exercise in power and politics today is the current presidency and administration. Now, I rarely make cases around something is good or bad. But what I will say is illustrative is the use of formal power in this particular environment, because I think it's just different than what we've seen historically. I think it's much more front and center. And I think it gives us as researchers, because I always encourage the students that I'm privileged enough to work with to think of yourself as a researcher for deepen your understanding of the world we ask ourselves questions like, what is formal authority and power? What's coercion versus influence? How do we see it manifesting itself? What are some of the positive aspects of it? And what are some of the limitations or potentially downsides of it? So we want to be circumspect in how we approach the topic and practice of leadership. And I think the goal at the end of the course is to not just give us a nuanced understanding of where these concepts come from, but more importantly, how to apply them usefully in the construct and concept of the organization that we're in. So let's go to the next slide. So leaders have a very straightforward role. Certainly we have to reach our goals and get results, but leaders have to acknowledge the past, change what isn't working, find out what needs to be done differently while preserving the core aspects of the organization and then moving into the future. That leaders guide that process. At Brown, we've been around since the mid 1700s. And we still go back to our founding documents. That's kind of the core of our DNA when we think about what we're going to do today. We don't have people saying, oh, these foundational documents, will get rid of them. They don't make any sense. What we are looking at is saying, how do we adapt the things that maybe aren't so effective anymore, given where we work, but also preserve what's essential for us? And that's really the role of the leader in a macro sense. besides any day-to-day particulars, is maintaining and preserving the core. We'll call those the roots of the organization, while breaking and abandoning the chains are the things that hold us down. So let's go to the next slide. So this is kind of a formal definition around the elements of what we're shooting for as a leader when we think of leader as process. So again, going back to the first definition, leadership's a social process that enables individuals to work together as a cohesive group to produce collective results. Remember, so that key feature of getting results. And the way that process works is through three elements of it, or three particulars, I would say almost legs of the stool: direction, alignment, commitment. And you can do this today on the teams you're on. Ask yourself, does my team, whether I'm the leader or not, does our team know where we're going? Do we have clear direction? Is everyone aligned? Are we all working on a set of priorities that support our overall direction? And are people committed to that? And the argument, and the academic argument you'll see here momentarily, is that you need those three elements as that process and enablers for leadership. So let's go to the next slide. And here's how it manifests itself. So direction is agreement on the overall group's goals. If you don't have people agreed upon, or at least buying into or sharing in the direction, it's going to be hard to get them motivated. If they're not coordinated in an aligned standpoint on how we're doing in the work that we need to accomplish, we'll work on things that are potentially cross purposes and cancel one another out. And then we have to have this commitment, a mutual responsibility to the things that we're working on in light of the overall group's goals and direction. And we can ask ourselves, and CCL, the Center for Creative Leadership, actually has a survey. You can go online, give it to your team. And that's a good way to test with your team to see which of these three elements maybe not where it needs to be for our team's effectiveness as a process and collaborative organizing entity. Next slide, please. So again, while the responsibility for generating called DAC, directional alignment commitment, may fall on the leader or a small set, it's really a process that everyone engages in. They're part of that process. The way that process manifests itself is through the social exchanges of the people in the group. Part of leadership theory, you've probably heard of the in and the out group. That's actually a leadership concept, social concept. Are you creating inadvertently an in-group and an out-group as a leader? Or are you trying to treat everybody in a way that they level up together and there's no sort of I'm on the inset? That can be a byproduct of leadership that's not entirely focused on creating that collaborative process. And then everyone needs to participate in all of these three elements of effective leadership process as a leadership group, as a group that's achieving common goals. Next slide, please. Just a couple more thoughts on this. So what you end up, if one aspect is missing, you end up with an ineffective leadership process. If you've got people, committed to something, but they're not clear on the direction, they will be working on things, again, that don't necessarily mutually reinforce. Things can fall through the cracks. If they're all coordinated, but they're not really engaged, then, we go to the meeting, but maybe I'll follow up on that. Maybe I'll do it. You don't have the sort of not only alignment, but people working on the same set of priorities. And if they're not coordinating with one another across the project per se, you just don't get any results. There's a lot of uncertainty. So the leader's job is to kind of manage and work within these domains for everybody's sake to make sure that we have direction, alignment, commitment in the full measure within whatever project, I'll say project, or whatever work we're doing. It can be a intact team or something that's more, I would say, situationally based. Next slide. And I'll leave you with this. This will be our last thing. We want to make sure we have plenty of time for questions. And this is the paper that it comes from out of Leadership Quarterly. So the DAC model, you can see it right there. This is just standard architecture that we would see for a causal model. So we'll start on the right-hand side. What we want is long-term outcomes. Remember, results, goals. That's our job as leaders, is to mobilize people in organizations using this collaborative process to get those. So the ontology, or the basic, what we know about this process, says that there's three legs to the stool: direction, alignment, commitment. But when we think about how those are operationalized, it's in this overall context of culture, right? So the larger box is the culture, whether it's the leadership or organizational culture, it doesn't matter. One's a subset of the other, but there's a culture within your organization. As a team leader, you have to attend to certain things. I would call these are variables in this model. So it's really important that you as a leader, and we'll work on this in the course, understand and build relationships so you can understand how everyone thinks about leadership. That's why I asked that question at the outset to put you in the chat, because as you can see, there's some similarities in how you each think about leadership, but there's some differences. It's important that you as a leader understand how people think about leadership from their own point of view because they're going to be looking for certain things and wishing to avoid other things. And you have to get people, if it's possible, to at least come to some accommodated understanding of what leadership together will be like. And that's the collective leadership beliefs variable at the bottom. Can you shape everybody individually sufficiently to have a set of collective beliefs? And I've worked with organizational teams on this where we have people on a management team that are fighting and disagreeing. And I say, all right, we need a set of basic principles that we'll operate under so that we all can agree that we will behave in this way with one another. And that translates into that central variable there, leadership practices. So we have to, within this leadership culture, if you're a leader or acting as one, or even participating on a team, be able to say, all right, let me understand what's important to my team, how they think about leadership. Let's come up with a collective set of beliefs together that we can operationalize in a set of practices, thereby giving us direction, alignment, commitment. And you can test for that, right? You can test to see, do we have direction? Do we have alignment? Do we have a commitment? You just ask people using a survey format. The presumption here is if we are attentive to that, and I want to be clear that leadership is a dynamic process. It's not just a one and done. I've got direction, alignment, commitment today. We're finished. No, it doesn't work like that. You have to constantly be attending to, and as people leave your team, as tasks change, as people come onto the team, you as a leader have to manage that collective process to keep people engaged, focused on the common practices, and make sure that mindset is effectively operationalized in the work that you're doing. Now, that's a lot to say on top of just getting stuff done day to day. I recognize that. But remember, as a leader, you have a higher charter in a lot of respects, and it's really managing this process. If you're someone that is disinclined to delegate, you'll spend a lot of time doing tasks and not a lot of time thinking about how to make the process of leadership more effective. And I think one of our goals in this program, mine in particular, is to get you out of that day to day a bit and thinking at a more meta level about how do I make sure that not only I'm effective as a leader, but I'm creating effective teams. So with that, let's turn it over back to you, Chloe and team. Thank you. And then we'll spend some time fielding questions if people have them at whatever level you do. So thank you for your time. You're sharing your time, your most valuable resource with us. And I just want to say on behalf of my team, on behalf of the School of Professional Studies in Brown, we're grateful for that.
Great. Thank you so much, Ed. That was so informational. Yeah, I loved that. That was fantastic. So thank you so much. This makes me want to apply for the program now too.
Well, we'll find a spot for the club.
So, while you're thinking of any questions that you may have for Ed to answer, I'm just going to do a quick overview of our online masters in organizational leadership. So, I'll just give you a quick introduction and then we'll go over the program format as well as the application checklist so we can make sure that your applications are all set and ready to go. And then we'll dive into our live Q&A. So, keep submitting those questions and we'll get to those shortly. So, a little bit into the program format. So, this program is 100% online. It is asynchronous, but it does follow a traditional 14-week semester. So, there are deadlines, there are due dates, but it does follow that 14-week semester. There is an optional 3-day in person session as well, and we'll have more information about that soon. There are also weekly optional synchronous sessions for each class. So those you'll be able to meet with your professor and talk a little bit more about what you learned. So tuition for the course is $5,625 per course, and that is 2 courses per semester for 4 consecutive semesters. So that is 16 total months in this program, and there are 8 total courses. We also have up to 50% merit-based scholarships available to you, and those are on a first come, first serve basis. So the sooner you get those applications in, the sooner the committee can review your application and review you for those merit-based scholarships. So next is our standard course sequence. And Ed, I'm just going to have you talk just a little bit really quickly about what these students can expect in their 4 semesters.
Yeah, thanks for that. So the construct of the course is intended to give you a grounding or a foundation in basic, and in some cases, advanced leadership practice, but also be mindful of some of the things that I would say are contemporary topics. So just to give you a sense, when you come into the course, We want to get you grounded in a foundational understanding of management and leadership, like I was talking about those leadership theories, how we can think about those collectively and independently. And some of you have probably had this in some capacity, other maybe not. So we want to give you a good firm foundation, thus the name Foundations, and sort of what we think about when we think management and organization. I teach the course on leadership and professional ethics. So ethics are as a set of, probably know this, normative standards around how we want to behave in a society or in a culture. And there's an element of morality, which is really an individual view that we'll talk about a little bit, but also we'll really be trying to answer the question, what is a set of professional standards that we need to adhere? Now, some of you, if you belong to a professional body, whether you're a lawyer or a doctor, we have a lot of medical people in the program or in our programs here. Architect, doesn't matter. If there's a set of professional standards, how do we think about those? Organizational behavior and organizational development. We work in organizations, and I find this one of the most fascinating topics because every organization, like I tell my clients, once you've seen one organization, you've seen one organization because they're all different. So how do we take what we're learning and know sort of commonly in this body of literature around organizational behavior and organizational design and put that into effect? That's really where I ask people to think about how, go to work tomorrow as a researcher, not a manager or an employee, and in a meeting, sit back and start watching what's happening. And then we use the theories in the course to contextualize that to deepen our understanding. There is an aspect of this, as we talk about from the definition of leadership and collaboration, of working on teams and groups. How does a group differ from a team? When do we have group work versus teamwork? How do we think about that? The standard Tuckman cycle of leadership, and how do we moderate that in a way that we understand some of the nuances of leading today? Change management, leading, we don't call it change management. It's called leading strategic change. Management is important. It's oftentimes the more technical side, the project piece. It's critical. Change leadership is different. Understanding the people's motivations behind why they change and or don't, and what we can do as leaders to create an environment where people buy into a change, do change, and then the change sticks. As I mentioned, politics, power, and negotiation is essential. Some people, they sort of bristle when we hear the first two words, ooh, politics and power is bad. Politics and power are important. They are tools or instruments that we need to understand how to use them in organizations. There's a penalty for not knowing how to use them, because it's essential if you want to call it something other than politics. And it should never, I was talking to a coachee today, and I said to him, he's getting ready for a promotion into a more senior management job. I said, when you think about politics, what do you think about it? He said, it's just a good way to lie. And I said, okay, that's a way to think about it, but I'm not sure that's how I would think about it. But I think that's emblematic of how a lot of people think about politics, kind of a dirty word. It's really an instrument. How do we build alliances? How do we have credibility? How do we ensure that we use our ability to influence people and understand how to match my goals with organizational needs and outcomes? I've got some interesting stories I could share where people who understood this, I think you'll be more effective. You have to know. And then negotiating is an aspect of that. So that's why they're all joined. One of the things I think separates this from some of the other programs, because I've looked at the benchmarking that we've done, is we are asking the question, and certainly this pulls into what we know here at Brown with some of our computer science and engineering colleagues, this notion, and our Master of Technology Leadership program. How do we lead with technology today? Like how technology is now part of the team. I was doing a development piece of work last week with the team and coaching them on communications, which I thought, I have a part of the book that I wrote on how to be more effective in communication. I had given them some science I thought was really interesting. He said, I sat down with my team and we practiced, it sounds silly, we practiced responding to an unhappy customer email. This is for a large communication company. So he was one of the IT people. He said, so we went through the steps that you gave us, and there's a set of steps. He said, but I had my team get together and I said, all right, let's put this into ChatGPT and have it write how to respond to an unhappy customer email response. I thought, oh, that's pretty creative. So they did that. Then they downloaded it. Then they looked at it, and then they made adaptations. And I think this really speaks to how we need to start thinking, some of you probably are, about technology and augmenting the work we do. Then there's a lot of trepidation around, oh, it's going to take my job. There's no doubt that work will change. The argument is, as I read in the New York Times recently, it's not the end of work, it's the end of boring work. So we'll see a lot of work that's done just because we have to do more tedious work. We'll see technology becoming a really important augmenter to the kind of work we're doing. It's not going to solve all the problems, because there's a question around veracity of data and ethics and trust and what can we rely on. that it pulls out data and information that's biased in a lot of different ways. There's plenty of work to be done on that. And then at the end, what I'd really love for us to do is have an executive leadership capstone. What that means is for each of you, and I haven't just, I mean, all these courses are in development. I mean, it's not like we don't know what we want to teach, but we want to do it in a way that I think is most useful. But really, the goal here is to help each of you, whether you do it individually, on a team, or both, become ready for executive leadership, like very senior leadership in organizations, if you aspire to that. But even if you don't aspire to that, at least building your own personal branding capabilities so that you can be at whatever level, even if it's an individual contributor, you can lead as effectively as possible. So what I find is I taught executive presence yesterday. That's one of the most popular topics. Things like that, communication, brand building, influence and persuasion, really applying these things in a way that help you prepare for by doing. Leadership is a craft. You have to do it to get better at it. Really helping you develop almost in a coaching kind of way, both from myself, my colleagues' standpoints, and yourselves as peers, to build that cohesion and capability to be a better leader in a real way. The course has to be theoretical. We have to ground it in what we know works and doesn't in the sphere of organizational science. But it's especially important that you are able to take that out and be more effective as an individual.
Great. Thank you, Ed. So now I'm going to go over just a little bit about our application checklist. So first, you will need a bachelor's degree from an accredited institution, as well as your resume or CV. You'll also need 3 years of professional experience prior to your start date. So at least 3 years of professional experience. You'll also need 3 letters of recommendation, and ideally, one of these will be from a supervisor in a professional role. We'll also need a personal statement. So that's going to be why Brown. Um, why do you want to join this program? What do you want to do after you graduate from this program? Next, we'll need your unofficial and official transcripts from all of your colleges and universities attended. And then an international transcript evaluation is required for all international transcripts as well. Next, you will submit your application fee, and then you will complete your application. So I will go ahead and drop the application link in the chat now. So if you're interested in applying, you can go ahead and click that link and apply now. And then all international applicants whose native language is not English must submit an official test of English as a foreign language or International English Language Testing System score. So for upcoming deadlines, our priority deadline for our first cohort in the spring of 2026 is coming up in September 15th. I know that seems kind of far away, but I promise it will come up sooner than you think. And then this program does have a final deadline of October 15th as well. And that spring semester will start on January 21st of 2026. If you're interested in joining us for our second cohort, so for fall 2026, that application opens September 15th. So you don't have long to wait to submit your application then. Our early application for that semester will be March 15th of 2026 with a priority deadline of May 15th of 2026. The final deadline for our fall 2026 start date is June 15th, and then that semester will start September 3rd of 2026. So now it is time to hop into our live Q&A. So if you have any questions, please feel free to submit those into our Q&A feature, and we will get all of those answered. And Ed, I know we had a couple questions in the past, but one question that we do have is what skills do you think Steve Jobs had as a good? That's our first question.
I'm not a psychologist, so I will be very cautious in how I answer that question. I think most people, and I've only watched a few movies on Steve Jobs and read a few bits, and I haven't studied it from a sort of research standpoint. So it's I would have to say it's bordering on speculative, but clearly he was a visionary, right? He had a vision for the future. Everyone has seen that when he holds up the phone and says, "This is here's what it's not just a phone; it's a web browsing device." I mean, he had a vision for the future. That's an important part of being a leader, whether it's 5 years or 50 years out. So I mean, I think he was visionary. Clearly, he was a passionate and committed guy. Clearly, he had very high standards. And he was pretty resilient. He went through, getting bounced out of Apple, starting Next Computer, coming back. So I think, he's the kind, he's intelligent. If we look at it, you'll get a different answer and even some conflicting answers, I think, when you apply the lenses of the different theories. It wasn't all peaches and cream, so to speak, but I think he had a considerable force of personality that I think there are some leaders, not all have, but you'll see some conflicting evidence on his effectiveness as a leader. Did he get results? Yeah, it's hard to argue that he didn't. The way that he got those results, I think some people would have some differing views on. I'll leave it at that.
Great. So our next question is, you mentioned that the various theories of leadership can all be useful, and this person is curious if you have an example of how you perhaps integrated a few different theories in your coaching with one of your clients, or if it makes sense to answer more broadly.
Yeah, I mean, I always tell the students that I have the privilege to work with, you're getting from me one point of view. And you should always, there's many points of view. And another thing that I always encourage, which I think students are a little freaked out by initially, is it's okay to disagree. In fact, I encourage it. That's what you do at universities are supposed to, is disagree and bring some shared, some different perspectives to the table. I think traits matter to a degree. So I typically, when I'm coaching, I'm looking at someone's traits and thinking about how can they use those traits. I think their skills matter a lot. If they're not good at something, I had a conversation. These are all different people when I say I had a conversation because I do a lot of coaching. 3 days ago, where this person said, I don't think I'm visionary enough. I don't think I'm a strategic leader. So then we shift into what does it take skills wise to be a strategic leader. But then he said, I also think now that I think about it, I have a little bit of a lack of confidence. And these are pretty senior leaders. So then we talk about imposter syndrome and things like that. So I tend to pull from what I know about the theories to bring to bear at the right time something useful from those theories. you know, People will ask like, "Oh, what kind of leadership style do you have?" And I tend not to try. And I'm not trying to be vague, but I don't necessarily think I fall or anyone really falls into one bucket. And you can change and moderate your approach to leadership at any one point in time. Sometimes people as leaders, as managers, they manage in one way. And then I say, well, let's think about what situational leadership tells us. Like the class last night for my office hours, like we don't delegate the same way to everybody on our team. Someone that's new to the organization, you're not going to say, here's the task, good luck with that. I'll check back with you in a month and hopefully you're done. Someone that you've worked with, and I asked the question to the class, I said, do any of you know anyone so well that when something is said or they see something, you know what they're going to say or do? Usually there's a few people in your life, if you think about it, like, oh, when something gets said, you can think, oh, here's how that person will respond. The reason I bring that up is there are people over time that you will know what their strengths and shortcomings are, just as a matter of having a good relationship with them as a manager. And in that case, you can change, some person you can say, can you take care of this for me? And they'll do it exactly the way you'd want it. Other people, you don't know them that well, you're not sure of their skills. You got to be a little more cautious with them, give them a little more guidance. That's situational leadership. Whether you call it that or think about, some of this stuff you're probably doing anyway, but now we can sort of think about it in a more structured way. But I would say I pull from the different theories as needed, but I'm sure I probably gravitate towards some more than others. But I think my goal here for us, if you attend the program, which we certainly hope you do, is that you gain a facility with not just knowledge of all the different ways to lead, but I would say a repertoire that works for you in the context you're in. And that's really important because, like, I spent 20 plus years in the Marine Corps. The way I led in the Marines, like, I just can't take it into the office here and do the same thing because I'd probably infuriate and alienate most of my colleagues, right? I mean, like having high integrity is important in both of those cultures. Yelling at people at work works generally pretty well in the military, right? In certain cases, but I try not to yell at my colleagues here at Brown. So, I mean, I'm using that as a little bit of a trite example, but you want to build a repertoire that helps you broaden the range of the things you can do as a leader. And also, I would say, makes you more sensitive to other people's needs and melding those to the organization's needs at the same time.
Absolutely. Thank you. So, the next question that we have for you, Ed, is, will this course prepare a person to deal with both public and private business and work with both effectively?
Yeah, I think the answer to that is yes. And we're going to give you the grounding, but again, every context is different. So, we don't have a course yet, and I'm not sure we will, on how to lead a government entity or how to lead a nonprofit or how to lead a sports organization. I would almost call those add-ons or things that we would talk about as a practical matter in the courses, the what needs to be different about. So yesterday we were doing my fellow academic directors at SPS. We went to Brown's athletic facilities. We're starting to work with the golf team to create experiences for students like yourself. You say, interestingly, 25 to 33% of business is done on the golf course. And, 90% of CEOs play golf, 80% of executives do. But what's interesting is certainly we're going to go over and let the students work with golf coaches and practice the game and have some fun. But there's a lot of leadership that's in golf. If you're a golf coach and you're on a golf team, you have to learn the capabilities of their players, how to give feedback. Those are skills that you need to know. How do I give feedback quickly and effectively without, upsetting somebody? How do I use people's skills and attributes to the best and highest abilities that they have? But interestingly enough, there's a lot of character, as in someone's individual character, that goes into playing certain sports or doing certain type of activities, but those can be true of working in a nonprofit. There's certain types of people that generally migrate to nonprofit management. And we want to understand what it's like to work with volunteers and how that might be different than working with people who are investment bankers or working with people who are town managers, right? So all those things are sort of variations on the fundamental themes that we'll cover in the course and helping us understand. And that goes back to my researcher comment, how to understand the needs of the people in the organization that I'm working in and adapt the particular theories to that setting. So yeah, it will give us both a private and it won't be explicitly laid out in the curriculum. Like today's the private day, tomorrow's the public day. We'll talk about during our office hours weekly how to manage some of those differences. And I'm always available, and I would imagine the other faculty will be too, on how to talk to you particular to your situation.
Perfect. So, along the same vein, we do have this question. Will the program include concepts related to cross-generational leadership? So, how generations respond to leadership approaches?
Yeah, I mean, I think we can't avoid that. I think I was with a group of younger leaders yesterday at Brown talking about executive presence, and they have a very different view. 42% of, I'll say, earlier career employees don't want to get promoted anymore. So we're going to have to talk about that. I think it's essential that we take the concepts and some of them do change. How do we think about leading in today's world? What are the generational differences? There's 5 generations of people in the workplace now. Workplace is very different post-pandemic than it was 20 years ago, 25 years ago. So we'll need to talk about that. And again, that is sort of emerging. I did a podcast a couple of months ago on leading Gen Z with a colleague of mine previously. And I would say a lot of the questions and comments will need to come out from people who are living in those different strata now and talking about what your shared and lived experiences are. Theory will answer and help a lot, but it won't do everything. And I think that's what's really important about leadership in this particular curriculum is having the opportunity, despite the fact that it's online, having forums where we can talk about these things. And I always encourage the students as we get in the courses, start teaching one another. Social learning works. I don't have all the answers, and I don't expect I would ever. And I don't have the perspective of someone early career or very late career. So I think we want to create the environment where people can talk about those things and think about the challenges and come up with some type of shared perspective and give insights. But if there's literature that we can add, we will do that. If there are current thinking that we can add in each of the courses, that's a nuance that I want to make sure we put in. And I think we use textbooks and readings that are as new as possible to make sure that's incorporated for everything from ethics to multi-generational management.
Absolutely. So, last question that we have is how long has this program been in place, and what types of jobs do graduates typically end up in, and what jobs would you recommend they focus on?
Yeah, so the answer to that is zero. This program is not in place yet. So,
No.
that's a very simple answer. This is a new, the people that apply will be breaking ground, so to speak. So it is not a new, it is a new program. Like there's never been a master of organizational leadership at Brown before. So I won't say we're going into uncharted territory. That's not the case because we've been teaching in the School of Professional Studies for 10 years. Leadership is really the business we're in. We're in technology leadership. We're in healthcare leadership. We have coaching programs. And I think that's what, and certainly we have a university behind us that's been around for hundreds of years. So I think we're confident that we can get into the space and really evolve it in a way that's useful. But the answer is this is all new. So you're in the first course. So In terms of what kind of jobs you get, that's, that we haven't had graduates that come out with this degree. I think we're going to be, as we start to, put together our sort of inaugural class here, my guess is people are going to come from a lot of different backgrounds. We have drawn people from the military in our other programs. We have people who are in different disciplines and careers that didn't get a chance to think about leadership in a structured way, like doctors. We have people that are transitioning in careers, although we also have people that are like doubling down in human resources and learning and things like that. Any business, and when I say by business, I really mean organization that's in the people business. And what I mean is that their primary resource is human, will be someone that I think will be benefited by this program. So the emergency service types of organizations, high stress, high demand organizations, I think, anything that relies on intensive human capital, which is like 85% of businesses today. I mean, it's just, these are the kinds of, I would say, people that would benefit from the degree. I don't know if it points anyone, it's not like a master's in accounting. Well, I'm a recovering CPA, so it's not like at the end you will get a job in accounting, either in public accounting, government accounting, non-for-profit, or industry. It won't be like that. So I think we'll be working with you, and we have a career. We have a team here at Brown that's in the School of Professional Studies that specializes on career enablement and management. And that's the kind of stuff that you'll be availed to, is to help you think about what are some of the things that I can do to get myself in a position for the kind of career I want with this particular degree.
Absolutely.
Hopefully that answers it. I'm not sure about the transfer credit. I don't know if we're accepting transfer credit at this time. I'll have to check. Do you know, Chloe, off the top of your head?
I don't believe so, but I will double check.
Yeah.
If you want to send us an email about your transfer credits
Yeah.
to the online masters underscore admissions at brown.edu, I can find out and I can get back to you as soon as possible. And we'll be able to really figure that out for you. So don't worry about that. But thank you all for attending today. I
Yeah,
definitely
thanks.
Yeah, I definitely encourage all of you to make an appointment with your graduate recruitment coordinator as well if you are interested in this program. They'll be able to help you with your application, answer any application questions that you may have. And if you have any additional questions about the mini lecture that you saw today or about the program, just feel free to email us at that online masters underscore admissions at brown.edu, and we will be able to get all of your questions answered so you feel confident going into this program. We will also be sending out a recording of this mini lecture if you did register. So if you had to hop off early, and if you need to hop off early, that is totally fine. We will be sending you that recording very shortly. But I just want to say thank you all for coming today, and thank you, Ed, too, for presenting on this topic and for being such a huge part of this program. We are so grateful to have you here. But thank you, everyone, for spending your time with us, and we hope to see your applications come in soon. But thank you, everyone.
And thank you, team.
Bye.